Well, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm thinking of the Pentecost readings, actually, 2 weeks ago, where the Spirit will descend on the whole world. And you will know that when sons and daughters prophesy. When young men and women see visions, and old men and old women dream dreams. I was keen to listen to what the old men would be doing. And I've been dreaming dreams for a long time. For I think 90 to 100 days I've been dreaming dreams, because dreams are the visions that I used to have. And I've been dreaming them about the situation and the times in which we're in. Times of chaos. Times of some cruelty. The difference between what we did when we were envisioning and what I'm doing now as I'm dreaming is that when we were envisioning, we were singing songs. The music industry was part of the protest. Bob Dylan had had enough. When Medgar Evers was murdered in his driveway, a 37-year-old civil rights actor and director who had been a World War II veteran, was shot to death in his driveway in front of his wife and 3 children. Dylan wrote to the Times, "They are a-changing. Senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Step out of your doorway and don't block the hall, because the times, they're a-changing." But not too swiftly. Not too swiftly. Michael Schorner, Andrew Goodman, James Chaney were murdered in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Registering people to vote. They were killed by the sheriff's department. Bob Seger wrote songs. If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd hammer out danger, I'd hammer out warning, I'd hammer out love between my brothers and my sisters. Well, I have a hammer, and I have a bell, and I have a song to sing. It's the hammer of justice. It's the bell of freedom. It's a song of love. Between my brothers and sisters, we believed it. They were songs of intention. They were songs of optimism. We believed it was coming. We saw visions. Well, I had a job when I was at university. I worked in the faculty dining room. The faculty who had evening classes would come in at 4:30 and have some sherry, and then have a quick meal and go off to their 7 o'clock classes. I met a young woman there, Elizabeth Hatcher. She became a very, very, very dear friend and carried a great deal of grace into my heart. We talked a lot about civil rights. I mean, the 60s were a mess and a massive conflict. And if you're over 60 years old, you were in it, or some of it. When we finished our work, we would often walk together to a coffee shop where she would have tea and a cookie every time. And she taught me then to sing, "We Shall Overcome." Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome. Someday. We're not afraid. We're not afraid. We're not afraid today. We shall overcome one day. Black and white together, black and white together, black and white together. And I remember a tear formed right here in her eye. And I was waiting for it to fall down her cheek, but it didn't. It stayed in her eye. think she saw me make an impulse to get a napkin so I could wipe it away. And she put her hand on my hand. Now remember, this is a dream I'm dreaming, okay? I'm dreaming dreams of the vision I once had. And she said to me, I don't want, these are her words, I don't want a white boy to help me. I want a white boy to love me as I am. I met her family. I met Evelyn. Her mother worked for the post office. Her sister Sherilyn and I lived with the Hatchers for a year and a half. I left the dorms, stayed there every weekend, most nights. I ate 8,000 meals there. And in August of 1963, we walked down North Capitol Avenue and took a right onto the mall and heard Dr. King tell us the dream he had, the vision he had, that we would be in a nation that judged us by the content of our character and not the color of our skin. I have a dream for this. And we walked back up North Capitol Avenue, and I thought that this was utopia. Evelyn was in the middle holding me, Elizabeth and Sherilyn, and we walked up that avenue to her home. It was, Camelot was playing on Broadway for the whole 60s. It's true, the crowd has made it clear. The weather shall be perfect all the year. We loved it because we were so desperate for good news, even if it was fantasy. A law was made so many moons ago here. July and August cannot be too hot. And there's a legal limit to the snow here in Camelot. Winter is forbidden till December and exit March the 2nd on the dot. These are the legal laws. But 88 days after Martin Luther King, 88 days after Martin Luther King proclaimed his vision and his dream, John Kennedy was dead in Dallas. And 5 years after the dream, he was dead in Memphis. And just if we thought that Camelot was a little too wonderful to believe, Robert Kennedy, heir apparent, was murdered in Los Angeles. And then the singing stopped. I have said to myself a million times, and maybe once or twice here, that the key to understanding this whole liturgy is in the collect. Because the collect gives us the clues, the cues, and the keys to what it all means. We ask for a faith that is steadfast, so we might proclaim the truth with boldness and, what words? Serve justice with compassion. The harvest is full. The harvest is ready. The Greek word there is an interesting word. It means the harvest is thick, and the workers are thin. The harvest is strong, the workers are weak. The harvest. In what universe are we living? In what universe are we living when three men, one of whom is filming, can be in a truck, run down a jogger in an established neighborhood with new home construction and children playing in their driveways and lawns and not be arrested for 2 months? So the harvest is thick. The laborers are thin because there's not Camelot. My daughter and my son are teachers to my wife and I. My son teaches common sense. My daughter teaches wisdom. She told me please to listen to a TED Talk by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She is a Nigerian author. And her topic on the TED Talk was the danger of a single story. People are very different from the way I have been taught they are. People live very different lives from the lives I've been taught they live. People feel very different from the way I have been taught they feel. Kenya Thompson has a story about me, and I have a story about her, and you have a story about me, and I have a story about you, but the danger is if it's a single story. English-speaking Europeans learned about Nigerian Africa from Rudyard Kipling, who said that the inhabitants of Nigeria were half child and half devil. Our children grew up on the stories of Lyman Frank Baum, the author of The Wizard of Oz. And he wrote about the people of the First Nation. He was an editor, a newspaper editor, and a publisher. And he said the only good Indian is a dead Indian. It was embedded into our DNA. You know, I predate television by 2 years. I had to listen to the radio, The Lone Ranger. You should get the old scripts of The Lone Ranger and Tonto. A woman who's studying in the East in college goes to see her rancher grandfather wherever the Lone Ranger lived. And she's abducted, and the Lone Ranger sends a letter, an appeal to the Lone Ranger to rescue the day. He is the enforcer. He is the equalizer. He is the statue of justice. And a letter comes ostensibly from Jane, saying that she's escaped from the bad men and gone to a cabin in Canyon Gulch and come quick. And Tonto and the Lone Ranger are reading the letter. It's hilarious if it wasn't so sad. Jane say, "Come quick, Kimasabi. We go?" "I'm not sure, Tonto. I'm worried about this letter." "You worried? Why you worried?" "I'm worried, Tonto, because I don't know that it came from Jane." "Not from Jane. Jane say so. She signed name." "Yes, Tonto, but she misspelled her name." "Jane went to college. She knows how to spell. Look at these words. They're all misspelled." "Ooh, me not know." Well, of course he didn't know. Because we had learned a single story. And a single story is always incomplete. And if it's incomplete, it can't be comprehensive. The presidential advisor to the president, Stephen Miller, is a man of a single story. Isn't that correct? The president of the United States is a man of a single story. Isn't that correct? I have told single stories to raise money for Haiti, and in school I have told the children in Holy Innocents how poor they were, how desperate they were, how pathetic they were. That's helpful for people who are going to give money. They like to feel they're doing something wonderful that nobody else can do. It's true. I would tell the children that if you see a family in a box, in here we say they're homeless, but in Haiti we say, well, that's their home. And I remember a little fifth grader asked the Bishop of Haiti, who was visiting, asked the Bishop of Haiti why Haitians live in boxes. And he was disturbed, and he was surprised that I had to admit that I told a single story. Jesus is recruiting disciples, but he's not asking volunteers for Camelot. He's asking for workers. And what do we commit to? We commit to pray for a grace and a faith that is steadfast, so that we can preach the truth with boldness and serve any justice with compassion. And maybe then the times will be a-changing.